Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. In this video we're going to be talking about Flayed Ones, reasons for taking them, what's the best attachment for them. We're basically going to go through some important questions to ask yourself while building your list and trying to include Flayed Ones within that list. If you've got any other questions you would like to ask for Necrons, any Necron units, let me know down in the comments down below, and if they make it into a video you will be shouted out. Right, let's get into the first question then. We've got, why do I need Flayed Ones? Now for me, Flayed Ones have two main uses within game. The first use is their melee output. They're obviously a melee unit offensively. They don't have any ranged attacks. The second one for me though is their infiltration ability, infiltrator's ability. In deployment they can start anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone and any other enemy unit. That could be very handy for all sorts of different reasons. I mean, you could actually argue there's a third role that they could have, which is just the secondary objectives, and for 60 points you could have them infiltrating and doing a lot of different objectives from turn 1. Turn 1 you could be pulling extend battle lines, and maybe you've got like a bit of a slow list that doesn't quite move and they're not as mobile as you'd like, but Flayed Ones are already there turn 1, so as long as you're holding your own objective and then one in the no man's land, you're going to score extend battle lines just right off the bat there. Secure no man's land again, you're going to need 2 in the no man's land. Could be something like established locust, doing an action in the centre of the battlefield maybe. You're not likely to get them in the enemy deployment zone, obviously in turn 1. Area denial again is in the centre. You've got actions that are outside your deployment zone, such as recover assets or sabotage, containment potentially, depends on exactly where you've deployed them, and even cleanse as well. So there's quite a lot of objectives, secondary objectives, probably about a third of them can relate to how you deploy these Flayed Ones with infiltrators. So do we need Flayed Ones? It all depends on the mobility of the rest of your list, I guess, and how you're going to get to objectives in the no man's land, especially early on. That's if you're playing for objectives and secondaries. But if you're using the melee output, there's an argument to take them, but there's also arguments to go with other units. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more later on in this video. In fact, we're going to talk about now. Are they actually good in melee? Are they good in melee? We're going to break down a few little rough figures for you. A unit of 10, because you'd likely take 10 of them if you're going down the melee route, down the damage output route. That's going to be 40 attacks. Now, with 40 attacks, because they've got the sustains hit, let me just double check, they've got sustain hits 1. Because of that, you're going to get an average of 33 hits due to sustain hits. Now, against toughness 3, that's what we've got. 30 wounds. This is before any armor saves are made, so pre-save if you like. 30 wounds. Toughness 4, 25 wounds. Toughness 5, 6 and 7 is 18 wounds, and toughness 8 and beyond, because you need 6s, 10 wounds, all pre-save. That's reasonable, and those numbers are quite high in fact because of the twin linked ability, which we should probably mention. They get to re-roll all their wound rolls. So I would argue they are good, and it's only 120 points for 10 of them. They're obviously not as quick as like Scorpion Destroyers, not as punchy as them either, but they are cheap, so in comparison, yeah, I think they are reasonably good in melee. Now we've got to also consider their Flesh Hunger ability, which we've not done yet. So each time a model makes a melee attack against a unit that is below half strength, any successful hit roll is a critical hit. So even if you roll a hit roll of a 3, it becomes sustained. It's a sustained hit, so it virtually becomes a 6 almost. So 3s, 4s, 5 and 6s, that's 2/3 of your dice now are going to literally be sustained hits, which is quite a lot. And I've showed you on the screen here, you've got quite a big difference between not having that ability and having that ability. An average of 53 hits now, 47 wounds against toughness 3, 40 wounds against toughness 4. 30 wounds against toughness 5, 6 and 7, and 16 against toughness 8. So you're forcing a lot of armor saves, even if it's like Terminators with a 2+ armor save. Maybe they're not the best target, but against the less, not as tough units, they could do quite a lot. So yeah, I think once you start combining those abilities and others, again, which we'll talk about in a minute, it does start to get quite tasty. What about the best attachment for Flayed Ones? For me, it's the Annihilation Legion. Of course, they're going to relate to the detachment rule, which is called Annihilation Protocols. So they're going to get a rerollable charge roll, and they're also going to get a +1 to the charge if you're charging a unit that's at below half strength. So that part doesn't always come into play, but remember their Flesh Hunger ability, going up against units that are under half strength, you're going to have those sustain hits on all the hit rolls. So it kind of does marry up okay, but yeah, it does go hand in hand with your standard ability. Now within this detachment there is a stratagem that is very useful called the Spore of Frailty. Now the Spore of Frailty, done in the shooting phase or any of the fight phases, you're basically going to have a +1 to the hit roll if you're going at a unit that's below starting strength. So even if they've lost one single model or one single wound, if it's a 1 model unit, they're below starting strength. So now all of a sudden you're going to be hitting on 2s. Going back to that Flesh Hunger ability, any hit is a critical hit. So if they have lost, more than half, that could go quite nicely as well. But if they are more than half, if they are below half strength rather, you're going to also have a +1 to the wound roll as well, which is, again, you've got 40 attacks. You could have 53 hits on average with that, and even against toughness 8, I believe that's 30 wounds. And that's, in fact, I haven't even included the +1 to the hit roll, so it's even better than that. There's a lot there. Yeah, that stratagem is an easy winner from that detachment when you're applying it to Flayed Ones. Now this one I think is the most important question here within this video. Are they an early game or late game unit? Now I've always thought of them as an early game unit. They've got infiltrators, so they're going to be deployed on the battlefield and hopefully scoring you one of your cards. Early game, hopefully behind a ruin, and then hopefully get unseen and maybe even get forgotten about so they can keep scoring until they inevitably do die. That's the early game tactic. But I've seen a lot of people using them as a late game unit with their melee offense. What you would do is you would simply put them in strategic reserves, or even if you're playing like the Hypercrypt Legion, you can just pop them back into strategic reserves within the game. And you're simply hiding them and you're in wait for enemy units to go sort of below half strength, basically. Once they're below half strength, all these factors apply. You're going to start to get your lots more sustained hits, or if you are playing the Annihilation Legion, you're going to be getting that Spore of Frailty stratagem off, and much easier as well, because you're going to be coming in, and of course you don't have Deep Strike, but you can be coming in off the table edge, 9-inch charge, re-rollable charge. If it's against the unit below half strength, you're going to get a +1 to the charge, and now it's an 8-inch re-rollable charge. That's sort of in your favour now. And then again, once you get in, there's a lot of hits, there's +1 to wound on top. It all kind of works nicely. And a lot of people are taking them in 10s and doing that exact synergy. They're waiting the late game for them to mop up, and for cheap as well. 120 points for 10 is fairly cheap. And I mean, that's not even the end of it. You can then use them as a scoring unit because your opponent hasn't got as much to just delete the unit like they would do early game. Whereas, if they're the only unit in the no man's land and it's turn 1 and your opponent's gone first, and it's the only unit your opponent can see, then they're just going to shoot at them, aren't they? But if it's late game, all the units are active and in play and in range, and your opponent isn't going to have as many units, so they can become a bit of a late game scoring unit. Again, it could be relating to your cards, it could be if you're playing fixed as well. Maybe you're playing fixed and you've chose cleanse. But I think both are pretty good strategies, whether you're playing them early game or late game. But for me, I still believe they are better early game because of that decent percentage of getting a card that would relate to where they're going to be placed in deployment. So that kind of naturally brings us on to the next question. Do you take them in a unit of 5 for 60 points, or do you take them in a unit of 10 for 120 points? Now if you want multiple Flayed Ones units, then I would just break them up into 2 lots of 5 because I played them early game. Cheap as possible, 60 points. If they die, they die. If they score and die, it's fine, not a problem. They've done their job, they've got your VP, it's okay. But now your opponent has got to expend resources to get rid of this 60 point unit, otherwise they're going to keep rinsing and repeating what they're doing with their secondaries. Again, it could be fixed stuff, it could be tactical stuff, or they could just become a bit of an annoyance in terms of a screen, or even charge into a unit that doesn't really fight very well, and now you've just tagged them up and they can't do nothing. They can't really shoot because it's like an infantry Hellblaster unit or something. So there's lots of things that relate to how they are in deployment, whether they're in 5s, whether they're in 10s. If you're playing them in 10s, I think you're going more for the offense. But if you are doing that, then I think there are just better options. I mean, you've got the Scorpet Destroyers as we mentioned earlier. Even just 3 of them with a Scorpet Lord, yes, that is going to be more points. I think that's 100 and off the top of my head it's like 180 or something like that. They're quicker though, much more tough. Look, there's 3 wounds apiece. The Scorpet Lord of course has much more than that, and he in fact has toughness 7 when he's on his own, with enhancements potentially as well. So they are doing a lot more. Lethal hits, devastating wounds, rerolls, damage on the charge. I think that's a better option than Flayed Ones. You've then got Ophidian Destroyers. Ophidian Destroyers are of course not as good as Scorpet Destroyers in terms of the punch, but they've got that Tunneling Horrors ability which will make them much more useful with the secondaries, which is another key role that these Flayed Ones do have. But both of those units have the resiliency as well, so they can fight. Ophidian Destroyers can fight, Scorpet Destroyers can fight. In fact, the Ophidians have quite a lot of attacks. They're not as good as Scorpets, but they have quite a good number of attacks. So for me, I'm going with 5. I'm going early game, infiltrate them, hope to score one of those cards. It might be a bit of luck, of course, if you go and pull Area Denial and you go first. Happy days. Of course, you might not pull that. You might pull behind enemy lines and bring it down. Then you know what, it didn't work out. But it's 60 points. The risk wasn't that great. And the final question in this video, we've got what's their weakness. Flayed Ones are weak. They've not got the best stat line. I'm just going to go back to their stats. I believe they are toughness 4, 4+ armor save with 1 wound, 1 OC of course. That's not really a defensive stat, but they go down to a wet fart, really, don't they? So once your opponent does start to go, you know what, I want them gone, they will go. Now, if you are deploying them with infiltrators and you've got them behind a ruin, hopefully on an objective, then fantastic. They're not going to be able to get targeted that easily because of the obscuring terrain. Because of the terrain features and the ruin rules, they're not going to be able to be seen. But there's a lot of indirect fire nowadays. Yes, you're hitting on 4s, but once you've got a good amount of shots going off, it's not hard to delete a unit of 5 of them, really. So that's probably their weakness, indirect fire, and their stat line. Once they are picked out, yeah, they're kind of goners. And they're not quick. I think that's another weakness as well. Even though they're infiltrating and they're in the right place nice and early, they're only moving 5 inches. So are they going to be the ones getting the charge off? Not so likely. It's likely going to be your opponent that has a melee unit that's coming for you, moving 8-9 inches up and then doing a up to 12-inch charge. They're likely going to be the ones that are attacking the Flayed Ones first, and obviously charging units are going to be fighting first. And if you've only got 5 of them, even if you've got 10 of them and you don't get to fight at all, that's not a good day. So for me, yeah, that's their weaknesses: indirect fire and the stats and the movement as well. So yeah, that is my 6 questions when thinking about taking Flayed Ones within your Necrons list. Let me know if you've got any other questions down below.